Arabia is changing its tune.
Constitutional amendment confusion in North Carolina, but who's telling the truth? All former North Carolina governors come out against the amendment. Joining us tonight to discuss those issues and much more is political science professor Val Atkinson. We'll also be taking your calls. Dial toll-free anywhere in the U.S. or Canada at 833-255-7171. You can also reach us at Fire Films on Twitter. Those stories, your calls, and much more are coming up on The Deal. And good evening and welcome to The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. Well, it's lottery fever. So next week, I'm hoping you won't see me here. I'll have my $1 billion and then I can move on. But in the meantime, if I don't win, you'll see me back here next Tuesday at 8 o'clock. The lottery is now over $1.6 billion. So somebody stands to take home at least $1 billion on their own if one single winner wins. But we got a lot more important news to talk about this week on The Deal. There's 14 days until the midterm elections. And this is a critical midterm, but like we said, every time we're on here, that every election is extremely important. But I know that there's been a lot of talk about changes in polls and all that stuff. This is the poll channel here. We don't want to talk about the polls. We want to talk about getting you out to vote, and we want to make sure that nobody takes this for granted and thinks that this is a foregone conclusion one way or the other. Without further ado, I want to bring in political science professor Val Atkinson again to join us this week to talk about what we can expect. Val Atkinson joining us again from Holly Springs, North Carolina. Welcome to The Deal.
So much, Ed. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, Val, there's a whole bunch of news to talk about. I do want to talk about some of the other stories in addition to the midterm elections. Let's start at the very tippy top, though. There was a journalist killed in Turkey, and we talked a little bit about it last week. Now it's more clear that the Saudis knew what happened. There's no doubt about it. And the president went out and said that it was possibly some rogue killers. You know, giving the Saudis a story. What actually happened there? And is there any way for President Trump to roll this back in at all? Or has he opened a Pandora's box by seeming to support the Saudi crown prince?
Well, I think one of the things that we've got to keep in the forefront of our thinking is Bob Mueller's investigation. He's still talking about our connection or the president's connection with Russia. Russia is backing off. It's not so easy to get money from Russia anymore, whether it's laundered or just straight out gifts. Saudi Arabia is a new cash cow opportunity for the Trump family, his organizations and businesses. He can ill afford to have them to cut him off as well. It would be detrimental to all of his businesses, all of his holdings. So he's going to side with the Saudis, whatever it takes. So I expect the type of behavior that he has been exhibiting around this whole issue. And he is allowing us to take this matter wherever we want to. Unfortunately, the major news networks are using this as another way to increase ratings and keep things going. But to Trump, it's a meaningless thing. And to a lot of other people, it is too. They're still trying to catch Trump in a lie. And why would you do that when he lies all the time?
Right. Well, speaking of lie, a national news story is that the president actually promised a 10% middle class tax cut in Texas last night. He went down to Texas to support his buddy and pal, Ted Cruz, who he accused his father of killing JFK. He said his wife was ugly, but now they're best friends. In addition to that, the president promised a 10% tax cut for the middle class by November 1st. How is that going to happen, number one? And number two, we know it's a blatant lie. Does it even matter anymore that the president lies?
No, it does not. What he's doing is giving his base excuses. Everybody knows why they support Trump now. It's the cat's out of the bag. But when he talks about financial issue and the economy and those kinds of things, he's given his base cover. Now his base can respond to questions from you and I and other reporters when they ask, why are you supporting Trump and what's going on this side of the ledger? And they can say, oh, I support Trump because of the way he's handling the economy. And all the while, everybody knows that the vast majority of his base is behind him because of cultural issues. It has nothing to do with the economy. Many of them are suffering more than people on the other side of the ledger. And they are still with Trump because of something more important to them, and that's the cultural issues that he represents. And I hope we have some time this evening to talk about his new foray into the embracing the word nationalist.
Right. I definitely want to talk about that. But let's talk about some of those cultural issues real quick. There's a caravan on the way towards the U.S. border coming through Mexico. These folks are coming from Honduras or Costa Rica, Guatemala, different places in Central America. The president says that it's a national crisis. He's talking about sending troops down there, all kinds of stuff. Again, in his speech in Texas last night, he made a big deal out of it. What do you make of this caravan? Of course, he says it's a Democratic plot. And why would the Democrats do this, for one? But what do you make of this caravan and how Trump has used it as an issue, saying that if we don't vote for Republicans, then we'll be overrun by immigrants?
First of all, it's red meat for his base. He has to do this. He has to show them that was one of the biggest cultural issues that got him elected in 2016 was his stance on immigration. So from time to time, he's got to still show his base that he's still in their corner. So, and because facts don't matter and truth doesn't matter to him, he can say whatever he wants, whenever he wants about whatever subject, as long as his base thinks he's still in their corner. And that's what he's doing here. Mm-hmm. He's fabricating issues, and when the truth hits him square in the face, he calls it fake news.
Right.
You can't reason with this guy. You can't make him out to be a liar, because that's all he is anyway. So we've got to come up with another strategy in dealing with Trump and his base, because the one we have now of trying to find that golden nugget that he cannot refute, that the whole world knows he's lying, and we've got him red-handed, hand in the cookie jar. I don't think that's going to happen.
Right. So the other cultural issue that I think you just brought up a little bit earlier is the whole notion that he's now willing to call himself a nationalist. And every connotation that I know about using the term nationalist doesn't mean anything good, and at least from the perspective, I think, that he's saying it. National socialism, Nazism, nationalism, whether you're, America first, the same people who, didn't want to get into World War II, I think of nationalism in those terms. Does he mean the same thing?
Well, it's a offshoot of the whole dog whistle strategy. Dog whistles are when you make a statement and it means one thing to one group, and it means those same words mean something else to other groups. And what he's using He's trying to say, yes, I'm a nationalist because I believe in borders and I believe in America first and I believe in strong economies and those kinds of things. When he knows what the dog whistle imparted to his base is, I'm with you, those guys in Charlottesville. I am with you, the tiki holders, the neo-Nazis, the white supremacists. I am with you. I'm a nationalist. And he communicated and got that word through. So he is using the media to communicate to his base directly because they understand the dog whistle. He understands them. And it's only us who are taking his words verbatim and dicing and slicing them and talking about what they mean and according to Webster's definitions and trying to say he's lying, but he doesn't care because the message that he's getting out to his base is what's important to him.
Yeah, I'm a little bit reluctant to talk about this, but I think I will anyway. I said I didn't want to talk about polls, so I won't talk about polls directly, but I want to talk about how the news media wants a horse race here. They want things to be, down to the wire. They keep saying how, this person is gaining, this person is losing. And then when you look at the bottom of the screen, when they show the polls, they interviewed 800 people. Obviously, polls can work to tell you a little bit of something. But what do you think about how every network, not just Fox News or CNN or whatever, every network is so concentrated on those polls?
Well, first of all, there are so many people here who really don't understand the construct of polls and how it works and how many people you need to have a ballot sampling and those kinds of things. But the experts understand them and they are doing the right thing, trust me. They've had their polling data examined and it's come out to be substantial and correct. The probabilities are there. As we stated this past Sunday on our show on Connections, what makes polling really good or bad is the assumptions that the pollsters use to determine what their sample should be, what percentage should be from the suburbs, what percentage should be from the inner city and the exurbs and voters who vote all the time and first-time voters and so forth. Those assumptions determine how many, what is the makeup of those people that you interview, whether it's 800 as you've mentioned or 1,080. It doesn't matter because the assumptions is what matters 100%. Now, obviously, some of these polls are going to be wrong. The true poll is the one on the night of November the 6th, after the polls close and all of the data has been scoured and certified, and we have winners all across the country. That's the true poll. And the reason I couch it that way, Ed, is because we know that people lie when interviewed over the phone about their intentions about voting. The last time we called it the Wilder factor. And that goes on not only in pre-election polling, it goes on in exit polls.
Right.
People have been found to lie about who they voted for once they've left the polling place. So you're right, 100% correct in talking about not letting us let the polls take us off our track.
Right.
And anything about that anyway. What we should be thinking about is the logistics of how we're going to get to the poll. How many people are we going to take with us? What's our day going to be like? What time of day are we going to go? Are we prepared? We got the proper clothing. We're prepared to stand in lines for a long time. All of that stuff should be pre-thought out. When you think it out that way and you've already called or you've gone online to check to make sure that you are properly registered and there won't be any surprises at the poll, now and only then Are you ready to go vote?
Now, I've seen some early voting stories in the media as well. A lot of the early voting stories are saying that there's been more Republicans out to vote in early voting, but I think that's true in most, especially midterm elections, that you see a lot of Republicans take advantage of early voting. But we have early voting here in North Carolina. I know there's 22 other states I know that had early voting as of yesterday. There's a few more states that started early voting. Will early voting tell us anything about how the outcome is going to be, or does it matter at this point?
Well, you sort of answered that question previously, Ed, when you said that news outlets tend to want to keep this a horse race. And when they see a candidate slipping down, they want to come in and say, they're slipping. However, we notice that the turnout is higher in X county than Y. And they want to keep you thinking that this is a tight race and you got to keep listening to them to get the news as to what's going on with the race. But the truth of the matter, the facts of the matter are that when we take a look at who is showing up at the poll in what county, in what precinct, we're talking about patterns. If there is a precinct or a county that Republicans generally show up in higher number than Democrats at early voting, then they should do it again this time. So you can't use that as an example and say, it appears that Republicans are showing up in higher number in early voting. Maybe they do it in higher number in that county all the time. But when we look at the full state, is it happening there? When we look at the full country, is it happening there? So I wouldn't put a lot of credence in one or two stories by one or two networks that talk about Republicans are doing well in early voting. That is supposed to be the Democrats' strong point. So maybe Democrats don't have the advantage. These are talking points by right-wing stations, and it doesn't do anybody any good for that kind of talk to be spreading.
Right. I want to remind everybody that you're looking at The Deal tonight on The Deal TV at thedealwithedclark.com. We're fortunate to have again in with us tonight Val Atkinson from Holly Springs, North Carolina, former professor of political science at North Carolina Central University, author of a number of books. And hopefully, Val, before we end tonight, we can talk some about your last book. In addition to that, been a radio talk show host for I don't know, a long time now, decades. And I actually am fortunate enough to co-host with Val Atkinson on Connections on Foxy 107, 104 in the Raleigh market, which also can be streamed and heard live from anywhere in the world, just like this program here. We're here tonight to talk about the midterm elections, what's going on in the world, political-wise. I do want to give people a program note on November the 6th, election night. We'll be here talking about the returns, trying to analyze what's going on, and hopefully give you some different insight than the folks that you normally look at. I want to also remind you to tell your friends about The Deal with edclark.com. There's plenty of articles out there. I write a new piece every day. So there's plenty of fresh content. If you have program ideas, of course, after the election is over, we're going to talk about a lot of other stuff. So if you have guest ideas, show ideas, feel free to drop us a line at thedealwithedclark.com. Val, one of the things that I'm concerned about is energizing young voters and making sure young voters get out and participate in this system. They were really energized when Barack Obama ran the first time. I know it's a midterm, but is it possible to get those same kind of numbers for a midterm election?
It's going to be difficult, but not impossible. It's going to be difficult, Ed, simply because I'm not sure if we have the mechanism in place to have folks energized like they have been in past years and election cycles, but not impossible. You and I talked about the whole idea of having vans to go around in various communities and have loudspeakers put on them and knocking on doors where the turnout is low but expected. I'm not sure if we are going to do things of that nature, if they work anymore. We have become so dependent upon social media and our various devices that I think we may have become overly dependent upon them.
Mm-hmm.
And we've gotten ourselves into a fix that we do robocall. That's about the least social media savvy that we have allowed to remain. We do robocalls, but we don't do a lot of street stuff anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of it is online, is in your face social media, your iPads, your iPhones, your other devices, that your Androids and so forth that you use on a daily basis, your computer, they are clogged with people telling you, don't forget to vote, but it's going down the same pipe. And that pipe is getting really crowded. So what we need to be doing, and I hope some people are listening, is we need to find other avenues in addition to, not or either or, but in addition to what we're doing now with social media. Social media is not the win-all, be-all by any means. It's very effective, don't get me wrong, especially for our millennials. But we need another source this election. We need some people on the ground. We need some people knocking on doors. We need people out there to answer the question, well, I want to go to the polls, but I can't get there. And somebody need to do like they did back in the 50s when they had the bus boycott in Alabama with Dr. King and Rosa Parks. You don't have a ride, they jump out in the street and snap their finger and wave their hand, and voila, up pops a car and says, this is your transportation.
Well, let's talk about that real quick. We're getting some feedback in the line here, but one of the things that happened in Georgia were some elderly folks decided they wanted to go exercise their right to vote. They were on the bus, and then people intervened to take them off the bus to keep them from voting. Obviously, there's voter suppression going on. I want to talk about Georgia a little bit more and to give us opportunity to talk about Stacey Abrams and her chances down in Georgia. We alluded to it a little bit last week when it was noted that the Secretary of State, who she's running against for governor, is also holding 53,000 voter registrations there. Talk to me about what's going on in Georgia, and is there anything that can be done about it, or are they going to be able to suppress enough votes to keep Abrams from winning the governorship?
Abrams has a severe uphill battle, but he has a battle that definitely can be won. I think some great things are going to happen out of the state of Georgia. I think a lot of conservative right-wing ideologues are going to be surprised with the outcome of the race in Georgia for governor. I look for Stacey to be victorious in that race. I don't think these last-minute shenanigans about photos of her burning a flag back in the day is going to work. I don't think that all of the opposition research negative things that have come up are going to work against her. And I think people are going to go to the polls in droves, especially around the Atlanta area. They're going to go to the polls in droves, and they're going to let their opinions and rights be known, that we want to change to the way things have been. and Stacey Abrams is our leader. She will become the first African American female to be elected governor of any state in the United States of America. And
So,
it's with
so
30% of Georgia's population is white.
right, and to say that in this whole history of the United States of America, she's actually probably the only woman I can think of that's actually ran a campaign where she was in the final two to run for governor. I mean, can you think of any other instance where there's even been an African American woman who's even gotten this close?
Never that got the nomination of a major party. No African American female has ever gotten the nomination of a major party for governor of a state. And, it hadn't been that long since we had our first elected governor of a particular state, during our lifetimes. Because way back when, directly after Reconstruction, that kind of thing wasn't happening, okay? There were some appointments before the 17th Amendment, which stopped U.S. senators from being appointed by the legislature and left that up to the voting of the individual citizens. Before that time, African Americans were appointed to a lot of very high positions. Rebels became the first African American senator in the United States Congress, but he was appointed. He was from Mississippi. He was appointed by the legislature. And back during this time, Mississippi and South Carolina were two states in which the African American population outnumbered the white population. So they could get a lot of things done. And then this was during the time of Reconstruction, when you had armies from the Union there to see that the Freedmen's Bureau Act, all of those measures of the Freedmen's Bureau Act, which everybody calls Reconstruction, was adhered to. So you had a lot of people appointed to positions as postmaster. During that time, that was a critically coveted position, postmaster, to be appointed. So it was right next to governor, a very high position. And African Americans did well. But when Reconstruction ended and the age of Jim Crow had its commencement, then things began to change for the worse. And I'm one to say that it's still with us today.
Well, let's stay down south and let's look to Florida. Gillum, who is the mayor of Tallahassee, is running a very strong campaign for governor there. Any odds on his ability to win that seat? He's running against, I think, a weak candidate and somebody who's completely tied himself to Donald Trump. So does Gillum have that same opportunity, or is he in a better position than Abrams?
Gillum is in a better position than Abrams simply because he's a known entity. He was mayor of Tallahassee, and that's away from Miami. It's over the Panhandle, and there are three distinct areas in Florida that flavor the outcome of political races. Down in on the tip in the southeastern portion of Florida, where you have Miami and some other bigger cities down in that area, Hispanics, particularly Hispanics from a Cuban origin, have a big sway on elections down there. And then when you get into the Tampa area, it's a highly conservative area. And trying to win that area is not very easy. But what most African Americans and progressive have done over the past, they try to do well in places like Dade and Broward counties because they have a lot of African Americans there and progressive and liberal-minded thinking whites. So in the Trump era, Trump election, both Broward and Dade County, we were watching at the 11th hours, expecting them to come through with a victory for Hillary, and they were going Trump. So Those things are not going to happen this time. Most pollsters predict that it's not going to happen that way. And that's why most pollsters predict that Gillum is going to be the first African-American governor of the state of Florida.
And that would be really interesting if that happens, particularly if both of them could win, and you would have Georgia and Florida with African-American governors. There would be a very big accomplishment. So in the meantime, I want to remind the folks you're listening to and looking at The Deal on The Deal TV at thedealwithedclark.com. Have Val Atkinson in tonight. We're talking all things politics tonight and next Tuesday. And then the following Tuesday on Election Day, we'll be here to do analysis and give a different take on, of course, you could watch CNN or any of those other places, but I think we'd like for you to come here and participate with us, because I think it's important to have different voices and not the same old voices, and voices that are driven by money telling you what to think. In the meantime, if you want to participate, the number to call is 833-255-7171. We really would love for you to join us. We know there are folks out there who called last week, just didn't hold on long enough, but we got a call screener in tonight, so hopefully we won't run into those issues where we can't get to you fast enough. So if you get through, it'll ask for your name and what you want to talk about, and then we'll put you in the queue and try to get you on. So 833-255-7171 is the number. Also, reach out, tell your friends that we're on. And we'll be here every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock, and you certainly can participate. In the meantime, I want to take a little small break, and then when we come back, we're going to continue to talk about the midterm elections, and we want to shift our focus a little bit towards where we are right now in North Carolina. We want to talk about some of the proposed constitutional amendments and some of the other shenanigans that are going on here with the folks that are in power. So we're going to take a small break, and we'll be right back.
Call Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Michelle.
Hey, Lynn, are you registered to vote?
Of course. I am not throwing away my opportunity to make my voice heard this November.
If we really want our voices to be heard, we need to vote in every election, not just for president, but for every office, school board, state house, senate, all of them. Can you help me get people registered?
Okay, I'm already on it.
Well, keep up the good work.
Let's see who else we can get on this.
Yo, Lynn, what up?
Hey, Chris, we're looking to field a full team to make sure every American casts their ballot this November. It's real easy from your phone or tablet to get the info you need to vote. Also, Michelle said so.
Well, I'm on it. There's no off season for getting out to vote. Call Janelle.
No, not now. I'm registering voters. Hey, take this. 4 million Americans turn 18 this year. That's huge. And we need every last one of them to register and vote. Because let's be real. It's going to be the young people of this generation that will change the world.
It's time. Our nation requires it. Our democracy in the country we love requires our attention, voice, and participation.
When we vote, we prove that we are a democracy with a government of the people and by the people.
So every community we visit, it's important for them to know they can really make a difference if they go and vote in every election.
Absolutely.
So we're asking for your help. Help us start a conversation across America about being active participants in our most basic American responsibility, voting. Talk to your friends and family and neighbors. Tell them your hopes and dreams for your family, your community, and our country. When we all vote, we determine our future. Call Lin-Manuel Miranda.
And welcome back to The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark, and you just heard from Michelle Obama and some other celebrities telling you how important it is to vote. We're here tonight trying to encourage you, if you haven't already early voted, you can do so in North Carolina. If you're not sure where to go, you can go to vote.org, put in your address. It tells you where your polling places are if you're going to wait until Election Day. If you want to just find out, you can just Google the North Carolina Board of Elections. You can put in your name. It'll tell you what your ballot's going to look like, a whole bunch of other things. Joining us tonight to talk about voting and all things politics is our Val Atkinson, who's joining us from lovely Holly Springs, North Carolina. Val, in the message that we just played from Michelle Obama and the other celebrities, they talk about the importance of voting. We've talked about it ad nauseum, I think, for the last 25 years that I've known you, about how to encourage people to get out and vote. Obviously, the PSA we just saw was focused towards younger millennial voters who use the web, and we talked a little bit about that earlier. What about old fogies like us? Can we make a difference still?
One of the things that I want to say to, as you characterize it, Ed, to our old fogies, our cohort, remember this: voting and the democracy that is derived from the voting process is not a spectator sport, guys. You got to understand that. You've got to get involved. It's participatory. I think, Tom Hanks and other people said it well. If you don't vote, we really can't have a democracy. A democracy is based on people getting out, exercising their choices. They make decisions based on their ballot. People who've been given the responsibility of running our government then have to do things or stop doing things based on what we tell them to do or make them not do or whatever. So voting is it. That's the starting point. And as I like to say, Ed, if you start a pattern of voting as a group, people will respect you for that. They will start doing as you ask them to do even before the election, because they don't want to do anything to risk losing your vote. But you have to establish that pattern over years and in some cases decades. But it starts right now. Let's establish a pattern that candidates will look at us and say, hey, those guys are going to go to the polls in droves. So if you want their vote and they're going to give it to somebody, you got to consider what they're asking us to do. That's all you want.
Right. Well, let's try to go to our phone lines. I think we got a caller on the line. Caller, can you hear us? You're on the deal. Let's try that one more time. Caller, are you there? We'll put them back on hold, and then we'll try to come back to them. Just be patient with us. This is live media. So Val, we talked about trying to get anybody out to the polls, young, old, whatever. It doesn't matter. We need everybody to get to the polls, participate, vote, that kind of thing. Let's focus here to the old North State, to North Carolina. There's one very interesting race that I want to talk about, and that's Linda Coleman. She's in the 2nd district. She has an opportunity to be an African-American woman to represent the 2nd district. She's in a really tough battle because the person she's running against, there's some very negative ads that have appeared, which we kind of anticipate was going to happen. Talk to me about Linda Coleman's chances. What's going to happen in that race, you think? And I know she's focused on healthcare and pre-existing conditions as being one of her big issues.
Yeah, Linda Coleman's race is, I would say, the race in North Carolina that is primarily dependent upon turnout. There are not a lot of people who are sitting on the fence in the 2nd congressional district. Most people have made up their minds about the various issues surrounding this election. So it's just a matter of who is successful, who's the best GOTV person, get out the vote. Who does that best is going to win this race. And I was glad to see over the last few days that Linda is getting a lot of help from the state Democratic Party. She is on the ground. She's out working communities, churches, businesses. She's talking to all kinds of groups. She's putting in the legwork to make sure that she doesn't leave any stone unturned, that she does all of the things she's supposed to do, touches all the bases. They have the best opportunity to win. And my prediction is, I think she'll win. She'll win, and it won't be as close as people are thinking it will be.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we're going to try to go to the phone lines again, Val. Let's see if we can get a caller in. Let's try this one more time. Caller, you're on the deal. Can you hear us? And what are your comments or questions?
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yeah, if you can talk up a little bit, it would really help.
Okay, good evening. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, I can. Go right ahead.
All right, I feel a little silly with what I'm going to ask, but it's in reference to the local elections. I know early voting is right now, but how do we educate? I was just having a conversation with my teen daughter. How do we educate on ourselves? I couldn't even tell her who we're supposed to be voting for right now. It's kind of different from the presidential election where you really know who you're going to be voting for. For instance, we're voting for people on the board of education. How do you really know who to vote for?
Well,
when I go down to the polls, I usually go down to the one on Salisbury Street when I vote early, and you catch the Democratic Party outside. They give you that list, but I would like to be in the know beforehand. Might be a silly question, but how do you really get educated on who you should be voting for?
That's a fantastic question. As a matter of fact, the
Hello,
Democrat.
You still there?
Yes. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, caller?
Yeah, go right ahead, Val. I think the caller dropped, but that is a good question.
What she can do, Ed, and I hope she's still with the call. What she can do is get on the line and get in contact again with that her party structure. I think she said she talked to some people in the Democratic Party. They produce a pamphlet and they sent it out to all households who were regular Democratic voters, I think. And it lists all of the voters that are running in your area that you have a choice on voting for. So it's a different pamphlet sent out to different counties. And that, it not only tells you a few things about the people that are running and who their opponents are, but it opens the door and it allows you to get in contact with them, the authors of this pamphlet, and say, I don't understand this, or is there more information on that? That's where I think this pamphlet is very valuable. And if you haven't received one, call the number again and says, hey, I didn't receive the pamphlet. I've heard about it. Could I get one in the mail? Could I come by and pick one up? And then get a chance to read that. And then if you have questions, then get back in contact with them. They'll be glad to have somebody to answer your question.
Well, Val, we had somebody who's been holding on for a long time. Let me see if we can get them back in again. Caller, can you hear us? You're on the deal. I see you there, but we're just not hearing your audio. We'll try one more time, and they've been holding ever since the show started, and I wanted to make them the first caller, but I'm just not hearing them. So if you can hang up and call back, we'd appreciate it. I know you've been holding a long time. We appreciate you hanging in there with us. So Val, so early voting is going on. We know that folks have an opportunity to take advantage of early voting, absentee voting, all kinds of different ways to vote, or you can wait until election day. Tell us why it's probably not the best option to wait till election day to vote.
There's so many things that can go wrong. The old adage, never put off to tomorrow what you can do today, stands very clear here. Too many things can happen. I mean, you could become ill. A lot of things could happen to members of your family that you got to rush away and take care of. But the first opportunity you have to vote under early voting, take it, vote early, and get that out of the way. I know you have some people like to stand in lines and just feel the flavor of the election day, that whole palpable thing of I'm voting and exercising my franchise. But that's nice, and I know some people like doing that, but voting early is safer.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right about that. One other thing that's happening here in North Carolina, let's stay in North Carolina for just a second, is there's some constitutional amendments on the ballot. There's constitutional amendments in a lot of states, and apparently this is the new method that the Republicans are using to change laws, right? To convince people to vote for these different amendments. Talk to me about these 6 constitutional amendments. What do we need to know? And then what are you recommending to people to do? I've been telling people just to vote no straight across the board on them. I can go into detail as to why, but you're the resident political science professor here, Mr. Atkinson. Tell us what the deal is with these constitutional amendments, why they're on the ballot.
Well, you told them exactly right. Let's start from the end. You told them to vote no. What they've done is put in a couple of what I call softball issues here, one having to do with victims' rights and the other having to do with hunting and fishing licenses. And they were hoping that they could get people confused and have them to say, well, I can't vote no on everything because I want to continue to hunt and fish. And I like the idea of victims' rights and being taken care of if I'm a victim. Listen, there's nothing's going to happen to your hunting and fishing rights. There's nothing going to happen to your victims' rights if you vote no on all issues. The other 4 issues have to do with draconian measures, such as voter ID. And that is the worst one because they haven't even written the amendment yet. They are asking you, the voter, to give them the opportunity, to give them the authority to write amendment as they see fit. Pen has not touched paper yet about voting rights, and they'll say they have the authority from the voting. So, I mean, that's crazy. Then they have another one about taxes, setting a cap on that. It's all about putting a hold on everything like they've done at the Supreme Court level in Washington, because they know they're going to start losing races now, from the legislature to the governor and council of states. And they want to have their hold. They want to put their mark in before they lose power. And so my advice, same thing you said, same thing Congressman G.K. Butterfield said when he was on our show this past Sunday, Ed, just vote no on all of the amendments that have been proposed by the North Carolina legislature. Just say no and you will be in the clear.
Well, yeah, that's what I've been recommending to everybody, is just to say no. In the remaining time we have here, we got about 8 minutes left in the show. I do want to, if you want to try to call back in, caller, please do so. I know you waited for 30 minutes, and then when we tried to bring you on, we just couldn't hear your audio. The number is 833-255-7171. We really appreciate the other caller that we had who was calling from right here in Raleigh, and asked a really good question. And that's the other thing that we can do here. We can answer questions for you. It was a very legitimate question about how do you get information, and that's what this program is all about, is having information that's useful, that's good, that's reliable, and obviously we have a political position. The thing about media is a lot of it isn't focused towards us. The only time you'll see an African American on MSNBC or some of those other things is whenever they're talking about African American issues, Val Atkinson. They don't necessarily invite us on to talk about the things that we've talked about in this program tonight. We've covered from soup to nuts, and it's real unusual to see 2 African American men talking about, or women, or for that matter, who called in, talking about substantive issues. They want to only relegate us to issues when it comes to things that supposedly only impact African Americans, like police brutality.
And that's why it's so important, Ed, that our listening audience and our viewing audience gets an opportunity to participate in programs like this. because we are touching on things that it affects your life, whether or not it directly affects African Americans or not. It could be an issue between a Caucasian and a Mongoloid person, but eventually it's going to affect African Americans as well. So we want to talk about that, and we want to be able to say that we have opinions on things that go on this planet. We just don't have opinions about things that go on in our country that affect us. And we don't get enough opportunity from the networks to have African Americans on to talk about issues other than racial issues and cultural issues that impact the African American community. And I think it's a wonderful program for young people to listen to too, as well, so that they will know that there's an opportunity out there for them if they are interested in things above and beyond cultural issues, above and beyond racial issues. There's a place for you to make it happen. So get interested, stay tuned, read, educate yourself, and don't let anybody tell you, well, that's 8,000 miles away. It shouldn't concern you. It should concern you. You're a citizen of planet Earth, so everything that goes on here is your business.
And I think that's a really good point, Val. But before we run out of time, I do want to talk about a couple of things that are near and dear to our heart. And one of the things that we do on our radio show is we talk about books a lot and things you should read. I do want to get some recommendations from you tonight, and I want to give you a little bit of time to explain why people should pick up the book. What are you reading right now, and what are you suggesting that people pick up to read?
Well, it's a book entitled One Man, One Vote, and it's by Carol Anderson. She's with Emory University. Wonderful book. She talks about the disenfranchisement of African Americans and all of the things that this country and conservatives, particularly in this country, have gone through to take the vote away from Black people and make sure we didn't get it. And she doesn't just dwell in the past. She brings this up to modern times when she talks about things that happen in Citizens United, how that affected African American enfranchisement. And also the number one, and you're going to hear more about this, is Shelby County versus Holder. That's the legislation, or that was the Supreme Court ruling that really might as well say struck down the 1965 Voting Rights Act because it removed Section 4, which without that, you don't have any measure to tell who's affected by this law or act or who is not. So that's the portion, Ed, that as soon as the Supreme Court passed that, North Carolina rushed to the copy machines and other places and the podiums to put in all these draconian measures, voter ID, voter suppression, the closing precincts, because before Shelby County versus Holder, they couldn't do that without sending their plan to Washington to be approved by either the Justice Department or a 3-judge panel. Mm-hmm. And they don't have to do this anymore. So they're free to gerrymander it. They are free to voter suppress and do all of those things. That's why many people are saying Shelby County v. Holder was the most important piece of legislation, important ruling that the Supreme Court has made this century.
Yeah, and I guess what I want to add to that is that's why we kept saying that you couldn't sit home in the 2016 election. Now the court's entrenched. There's no way in the world you're going to make any kind of inroads. Actually, the chance that another left-leaning justice might die is much greater than one on the right. And then Kavanaugh's on the court. He's going to be there for a long time. He's already tipped his hand how he feels about things like Shelby. He's obviously not for affirmative action. He's not for a lot of things that, we hold near and dear to our heart, things that are going to make it much more difficult for us. So can you, one more time, give us the name of the book and the author, and then, because I think that's something that people should know about, what the things that they're doing to try to suppress the vote.
Carol Anderson is her name. And the title of the book is One Man, No Vote.
Right. One man, no vote. Yeah, and I would highly recommend that as well. Val, we got a few minutes remaining here. I think we've beat the dead horse that we want people to get out and vote. One of the reasons why we're doing this series of shows leading up to the election and up to election day for our election day coverages, we want to get people used to talking about the issues, not thinking that they can only talk about certain issues. We want you to be cognizant of what's going on in the world outside of your space. Like you said, we're citizens of the world. We have a responsibility to be involved, be informed, be in the know. And this is what this program is about. We really appreciate the folks who try to call in again tonight. We'll work that out. We're on show number 2. So as we get better and better, we'll work out those technical difficulties with phone calling. You don't realize how much work goes into doing this. It's a labor of love for us to try to make sure people understand all the issues. Anything in closing tonight, Val?
I would encourage all of our listeners and viewers to mark their calendar to make sure they're back here again next week at 8 o'clock. We'll have another great show for you.
All right. Thanks, Val, calling in from Holly Springs, North Carolina. We're going to try to have some other guests on the next program as we get closer to Election Day, people that can talk about the election, or maybe people who are running for office. And if you know anybody who needs to watch this to understand the issues better, please, by all means, share the link with them, thedealwithedclark.com. After the show is over, if somebody didn't get a chance to look at it, you can go to YouTube. It'll be there. But you can always come to the site here. It'll always be available on the site as well. YouTube is just another outlet for people to catch the show. Maybe just by chance they'll run across it. But the real place to come is thedealwithedclark.com. There's always a new article out there every day from me about some topic. Please take a look at those, share those with your friends, ask people to subscribe to the site. In the meantime, I'm going to win the lottery tonight, so there's no need for you to go out. But if you want to, you still got about an hour left to go buy a Mega Millions ticket. Maybe you can be a billionaire like me. And then next week, I'll be in here and I'll be one happy guy. So in the meantime, have a great week. We'll see you next Tuesday at 8. And you've been watching The Deal with Ed Clark and Val Atkinson. And we'll see you next week.
Look, a lot of our elected officials are uninformed. Okay, is there any kind of introduction, or are we just plunging in and then you guys will... I don't care about politics. Look, I don't care about Pokemon, but that doesn't mean it won't keep on coming back. That's actually what people in power are betting on, that you'll check out, that you won't vote. And when you opt out, that's what allows other people to essentially fill that void. It allows them to do nothing about the things that you'd like to see government do. So if you really want to throw a wrench in their plans, throw them out. Vote in somebody better. Next, why bother voting when I can't relate to the candidates? Now, this is actually a good question. For way too long, politicians haven't been representative of America as a whole. But that's changing this year. More women are running for office than ever before. More LGBT candidates are running for office. First-time candidates, young veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan, young leaders from across the political spectrum. So this year, more than any other year, you have the chance to change the face of politics so that it looks more like your own. You remember those hearings where members of Congress were asking Mark Zuckerberg questions like they'd never used the internet before? That's because they haven't. Here's your chance to vote for people who actually know what the internet is. My vote doesn't matter. Now, the last presidential election turned on fewer than 100,000 votes in 3 states. More people go to Coachella. Look, when it comes to something like Dancing with the Stars, people actually think their vote matters. But a vote in this November's election actually does matter. It could elect people who make our criminal justice system fair and your student loans easier to afford. And by the way, you wouldn't let your grandparents pick your playlist. Why would you let them pick your representative who's going to determine your future? Midterm elections are boring. Let me know when we're talking about a presidential race. Sometimes these elections are even more important than a presidential race. This November, 36 states are picking governor. Every single spot in the House of Representatives is on the ballot. Fill them with people who care about what you care about. Elections, by the way, aren't boring. You know what's boring? Scrolling through endless photos of your dinner on Instagram. That's boring. I don't know the candidates well enough. I'm uninformed. There are people running for office who don't think women should get equal pay for equal work, who don't think we should do anything about schools getting shot up, or who think we shouldn't raise the minimum wage for people who are working their tails off every day but still can't afford to pay the rent. Vote them out. Vote for somebody who shares your values. Also, this thing has something called Google. You can't use Google to figure out which candidates on your local ballot think that the earth is flat and climate change is a hoax. Google is super easy to read. I don't know where I'm supposed to vote. This one's easy. Do you know your address? If you do, just go to vote.org, plug in your address, it'll tell you where to vote. It's that simple. There's no joke here. Which is, there shouldn't be, because it's just like pretty simple. All right, next. I don't have time to vote. I understand that it's not always easy to find time to vote on a Tuesday. That's why in every state, you can get an absentee ballot, which you can mail in or drop off ahead of Election Day. And in 37 states, you can actually vote early, which is like going to a private Jay-Z Beyonce concert, just without Jay-Z and Beyonce. But take some friends anyway, beat the lines, because like most things, voting's more fun when you do it together. Share the video and tell your friends to vote on November 6th. It's a wrap. It's a wrap. You know, I'd stay for the wrap party, but I've got other stuff to do.
That was super.